My stomach dropped like an elevator in freefall, then twisted into a painful knot as I heard my son-in-law James's words slice through the air. "Mrs. Caldwell is transitioning to an advisory role," he announced to the Aldridges. "Our $42,000 commission and clients of 35 years. My fingers went numb around the brass caliper I'd used since 1988, and the workshop's edges blurred as a wave of dizziness washed over me. My name is Irene Caldwell. I'm 64 years old, and this is the story of how my son-in-law tried to erase me from the business I built with my own hands, and how I fought back using skills honed over 4 decades of craftsmanship that he never bothered to understand. If this situation resonates with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from." I stood frozen behind the workshop door, my calloused fingers clutching the $300 brass caliper I'd used for over 3 decades. The rich scent of freshly cut oak filled my nostrils as I watched my daughter Rebecca stand silently beside her husband, eyes downcast, as James continued destroying my legacy. Caldwell Custom Cabinetry is evolving beyond outdated methods, my son-in-law explained with the confidence of someone who'd been in the business 5 years, not the 35 I'd devoted to building it from nothing after my husband Michael's death left me a widow with a 17-year-old daughter to support. Eleanor Aldridge, matriarch of the family, who'd commissioned 16 pieces from my hands over 3 decades, worth over $230,000 in total, looked visibly confused. Her brow furrowed as she glanced around the 3,200 square foot workshop where every tool hung in its precise place. "But Irene will still be overseeing the finished piece?" Eleanor asked, her voice carrying the slight hesitation of someone fearing change. James smoothed his silk tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed immediately when my daughter first brought him home. "Of course, she'll be consulted," he replied with practiced ease. "But our new fabrication process streamlines production while maintaining the appearance of traditional methods." Appearance, not reality. My knuckles whitened around the caliper as heat rushed to my face. "Well," Eleanor said, shifting her weight from one foot to another, "we specifically commissioned Caldwell because of Irene's attention to historical accuracy." "I completely understand," James assured her. "Rest assured, we're simply enhancing Irene's vision with modern efficiency." I backed away silently, the workshop apron around my waist, carrying the fine sawdust that had been my constant companion since I started building fine furniture in my garage after Michael died. While other widows my age struggled, I'd proven a woman could thrive in a male-dominated industry. I'd paid for my daughter Rebecca's $86,000 college education, helped with their $50,000 house down payment, and welcomed James into both family and business. And now he spoke about me as if I were already gone. "Irene?" Roy's gravelly voice broke through my thoughts. At 72, my master craftsman had been with me for nearly 3 decades, creating joints so perfect you couldn't slide a human hair between them. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I straightened my spine, a habit from decades of ensuring proper posture for precision work. "Just thinking about the breadboard ends for the Aldridge desk," I lied. When James later led Eleanor through the workshop, I caught fragments about efficiency and scalable production. My daughter Rebecca followed a step behind, her design portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield, quieter these days, deferring to her husband more often than not. As they passed my workbench, James nodded with that tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Good news, Irene. The Aldridges are excited about our new production approach." I maintained steady eye contact, feeling the weight of 3 decades of expertise in my gaze. "That's interesting." Eleanor specifically mentioned wanting traditional breadboard ends with exposed tenons, just like their library table. A flicker of annoyance crossed my son-in-law's face. We discussed alternatives that would deliver the same aesthetic with improved production time. "Some techniques exist for a reason, James," I said, running my thumb along the grain of a piece of oak. Breadboard ends aren't just decorative. They allow seasonal wood movement while maintaining a straight edge, particularly important in a 300-year-old home with minimal climate control. Eleanor smiled at me with visible relief. That's exactly why we insisted on Caldwell. Irene understands our home's specific needs. James adjusted his tie, his tell when feeling challenged. We'll certainly take that into consideration. That evening, I discovered my email access had been changed. The IT support person explained the entire company was transitioning to a new project management system. Mr. Porter said not to worry about learning the new software, he added. He mentioned you prefer working directly in the shop anyway. My heart stopped. Blood pounded in my ears so loudly I could barely hear. This wasn't just a casual comment to a client. My son-in-law was systematically removing my access to information, client communications, and company decisions. That night, I pulled out one of dozens of leather-bound notebooks I'd kept throughout my career. With the same precision I applied to measuring exotic hardwoods, I documented what I'd overheard, the system changes and the subtle shifts in authority. What James didn't understand was that I hadn't built a successful business by being oblivious to threats. These calloused hands hadn't just crafted fine furniture, they built relationships, trust, and a business approach that couldn't be learned in business school. He thought my age made me obsolete. He was about to discover how catastrophically he had underestimated the woman who had built a $2.7 million business with nothing but a second-hand table saw and determination that steel couldn't match. Over the next weeks, I watched the pattern emerge, like rain revealing itself in freshly planed wood. Each day brought new evidence of James's systematic plan to edge me out of my own company. The workshop had always been my sanctuary, the familiar sense of sawdust and linseed oil, the comforting heft of tools that fit my grip perfectly after decades of use. But even this space was being transformed. Equipment had been rearranged without my input, with emphasis on the new computer-controlled machinery James had insisted would revolutionize production efficiency. This CNC router reduces fabrication time by 60%, James explained during a staff meeting, projecting spreadsheets onto the wall of what had once been our materials storage room, now converted to a sleek conference space. The investment will pay for itself within 18 months. At what cost to quality? I asked, noting how several longtime craftspeople shifted uncomfortably. The machine can't feel the grain or make adjustments for a knot discovered mid-cut. James smiled that tight, dismissive smile. With all due respect, Irene, that's precisely the kind of thinking that kept this company regional when it could have scaled nationally years ago. With respect. That phrase had become his preferred preamble to dismissing my expertise. I watched Rebecca's face for any reaction, but she kept her eyes on her tablet, making notes without comment. Let me be perfectly clear. I've never opposed technology. We'd incorporated CAD software for designs years ago, but there's a difference between tools that enhance craftsmanship and systems that replace it. A distinction that James, with his MBA and 5 years of experience, failed to grasp. After the meeting, I found Martin, one of my most experienced craftsmen, in the finishing room, carefully applying oil to a walnut dining table. "Did you see the new project management system rollout timeline?" he asked, without looking up from his methodical circular motions. "I wasn't aware there was a timeline," I admitted. Martin's weathered hands paused. It was in this morning's email, the one with critical company update in the subject line. I hadn't received it. Another oversight in the new communication system. Back in my office, I found Tyler Martinez waiting outside. At 28, Tyler was our most promising apprentice, 3 years into learning the craft with genuine passion. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you have a minute?" His expression held the earnestness that reminded me why I loved teaching the next generation. "I'm confused about the Sanderson project specifications." He placed printed plans on my desk, not the digital versions now standardized under James's protocols. James changed the drawer joinery from dovetails to doweled construction, Tyler explained, pointing to the modified specifications. But Mrs. Sanderson specifically referenced wanting traditional dovetails, like in her grandmother's bureau. She even showed us photos. I studied the changes, noting several other modifications: thinner drawer bottoms, simplified molding profiles, and veneer rather than solid panels for the sides. All changes that would significantly reduce labor hours and quality. When were these changes made? I asked. Yesterday. James said it was a company-wide efficiency update and that clients wouldn't notice the difference. I thought of Catherine Sanderson, a retired judge who'd saved for years to commission a piece that would become a family heirloom. She would absolutely notice. That evening, I lingered in the workshop after everyone had gone, running my fingers along a partially completed cherry bookcase. The shop felt different now, the new equipment looming like interlopers, my careful organization disrupted by James' efficiency improvements. I recalled the day I'd started this business in my garage, with nothing but a second-hand table saw and determination. After Michael's unexpected heart attack 15 years ago, many assumed I would sell. Instead, I doubled down, proving that a widow in her late 40s could not only sustain, but grow a custom woodworking business in a male-dominated field. "Mom, you're here late." My daughter Rebecca stood in the doorway, her expression hesitant. My daughter had inherited my eye for proportion and her father's height. Lately, though, she seemed diminished somehow, her natural confidence overshadowed. "Just finishing some details on the cherry bookcase," I said. "The grain on these panels is exceptional." She came closer, running her hand over the wood. "It really is beautiful." For a moment we stood in silence, shared appreciation of materials bridging the growing distance between us. "I saw the changes to the Sanderson Commission," I finally said. "The client specifically requested traditional dovetails." Rebecca sighed. "James thinks we need to standardize construction methods for better efficiency. He's shown me the production data and—" "This isn't about data," I interrupted. "It's about a promise to a client. Catherine Sanderson came to us because she values craftsmanship that will last generations, not because we're efficient." Before she could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor Aldridge. "Irene, concerned about changes to secretary desk design. New person called suggesting production improvements. Please call tomorrow." As Rebecca left, I noticed a glossy brochure on the workbench she'd been standing near. It featured a sleek corporate headquarters with National Home Designs, Inc. emblazoned across the top. Inside were highlighted passages about acquisition growth strategies and consolidating regional craftsmanship under national distribution. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me as realization dawned. This wasn't just about modernizing operations or changing my role. James wasn't planning to continue the business I'd built. He was positioning it for sale. I carefully photographed each page before returning it exactly as I'd found it. Then I updated my documentation with hands that belied the earthquake happening within. The Hargrove Mansion crisis broke everything open. The Historic Preservation Commission meeting was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, but I only discovered it existed at 8:47 when Martin, my longtime craftsman, called me from his truck. "You're not at the commission hearing?" His gravelly voice carried a rare note of alarm. "What hearing?" I asked, coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips. Martin's silence spoke volumes. "James and Rebecca are presenting the Hargrove Dining Room Restoration Project for approval. Commission members were asking why you weren't there." My stomach dropped like a heavy mallet on wood. The Hargrove Mansion was our most prestigious current project, a complete restoration of woodwork in a landmark 1840s home. The Preservation Commission's approval was essential before work could proceed, and I hadn't been informed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already moving. When I slipped into the back of the municipal building's hearing room at 9:12, James was mid-presentation, professionally commanding in his tailored suit as he clicked through slides of our proposed work. Our advanced fabrication techniques allow us to replicate historical elements with precision while substantially reducing production time, he explained confidently. Rebecca stood beside him, her design portfolio open as she nodded along. Neither had noticed my arrival. From my position at the back, I could see the commissioners' faces, and their skepticism was evident. Margaret Chen, the head of the commission and a restoration architect I'd worked with for years, was frowning deeply. "These modified joints you're proposing," she said, pointing to the screen. "They don't match the original construction methods shown in your documentation photos." James smiled smoothly. "They achieve the same visual effect while allowing for more efficient production and installation. But they're not historically accurate," Margaret persisted. "The Hargrove Mansion has National Register status. All restoration elements must use period-appropriate construction techniques. Our testing shows that the modern alternatives actually provide superior stability," James countered. I watched Commissioner Chen's eyebrows rise. "Mr. Porter, we don't approve restoration plans based on efficiency or even stability improvements. We require historical authenticity. That's the entire point of preservation." As James attempted to redirect the conversation, I made my way to the front of the room. The slight gasps and murmurs alerted James to my presence before he saw me. "Irene," he said, recovering quickly. "I'm glad you could join us." I was just explaining our innovative approach to the Hargrove restoration. I smiled calmly. "Good morning, commissioners. I apologize for my late arrival. There seems to have been a communication oversight." I turned to Margaret Chen. "May I address the commission's concerns?" Without waiting for James's reaction, I moved to presentation computer and navigated back several slides to the original documentation photos. The Hargrove dining room features traditional mortise and tenon joinery with specific decorative details, typical of 1840s craftsmanship in this region, I explained, pointing to particular elements. These weren't merely aesthetic choices. They reflect the materials available and construction techniques of the period. I pulled a small notebook from my bag. "I've prepared detailed drawings of our approach to replicating these exact methods. We'll be using quarter-sawn white oak sourced from the same region as the original lumber, with hand-cut joinery that matches the original construction precisely." Margaret nodded approvingly. "This is exactly what we require for National Register properties." "But," James interjected, "the modified approach could save nearly 4 weeks of production time and would be rejected by the commission," Margaret replied firmly. "Ms. Caldwell clearly understands the requirements for historical accuracy." I felt James's stare burning into me as the commissioners asked technical questions about wood movement, finish composition, and joinery techniques, all of which I answered from decades of experience with historical restoration. When the commission unanimously approved the authentic restoration approach I'd outlined, the tension in the room was palpable. Outside in the parking lot, James confronted me, his face flushed with barely contained anger. "You completely undermined me in there," he hissed. "We could have negotiated a compromise approach." "There was no room for negotiation, James. Historical accuracy isn't optional for registered landmarks. It's literally the law. You should have consulted with me before contradicting our presentation." I met his gaze steadily. "Just as you should have consulted with me, the founder of this company and the person with 30 years of preservation experience, before scheduling this hearing." That afternoon, I made 2 crucial discoveries. The first came when Eleanor Aldridge called about her secretary desk. "Irene, I'm confused," she said. "Someone named Melissa from your office called to discuss value-engineered alternatives for our project. She mentioned veneers instead of solid panels and simplified joinery to meet our budget constraints." My grip tightened on the phone. "Eleanor, we never discussed budget constraints or value engineering for your piece." "That's what I told her," We specifically chose Caldwell because we want the same quality as the library table you made us years ago. After reassuring Eleanor, I searched for this mysterious Melissa, who was apparently calling my clients. No one by that name worked for us. I found my answer when I overheard James on the phone in his office. The door partially open. Yes, that's right, Melissa. Continue reaching out to the client list I sent you to discuss the modernized construction options. National Home Designs wants to ensure the transition will be smooth for existing clients if, right, exactly, the acquisition would maintain the Caldwell name for brand recognition, but standardize production methods across all regional brands. My heart nearly stopped. Acquisition, National Home Designs, the company from the brochure I'd found. James wasn't just changing my company's methods. He was preparing to sell it out from under me. The second discovery came when Tyler approached me at the end of the day, hesitation in every step. Mrs. Caldwell, I think you should see this. He handed me his tablet, open to an internal email. It went out to the new hires, but not to you or Martin or any of the senior craftspeople. The email outlined a production modernization timeline with phases for client reorientation, standardized fabrication implementation, and legacy skill transition. The final phase was labeled organizational restructuring. At the bottom was a note: please do not discuss these plans with legacy team members until the formal announcement. We want to ensure a positive presentation of these necessary changes. Legacy team members. That's what we had become. Outdated relics to be managed during transition. That night, alone in my workshop with only the smell of sawdust and linseed oil for company, I faced the truth that had been gradually revealing itself like grain in a sanded board. I was being erased from my own life's work. I ran my hand along the cherry bookcase I'd been crafting, feeling the silky smoothness that only came from proper preparation and patient finishing. There was no shortcut to quality, something James had never understood. I opened my documentation notebook and made detailed entries about both discoveries. My craftsman's hands steady despite the earthquake in my heart. Then I reached for my phone and began making calls to people I'd known for decades. Clients, suppliers, industry colleagues. It was time to stop observing and start acting. James thought my age made me easy to outmaneuver. He was about to discover how catastrophically he had underestimated me. My strategic response began with a single phone call to Frances Hargrove, the family matriarch whose dining room restoration had nearly been derailed. Frances, I'd like to personally invite you to a special workshop tour to see our historical restoration techniques in action, I said, my voice steady despite the stakes. We've begun preparing the quarter-sawn oak for your project, and I thought you might appreciate seeing the traditional methods that will honor your home's heritage. I'd be delighted, Irene, she replied warmly. After that commission meeting, I'm more interested than ever in understanding what makes your work so special. Wonderful, and if you wouldn't mind, several other clients with historical properties have expressed interest. Would you object to making it a small gathering? That evening, I made 11 similar calls to our most significant clients, particularly those with historical properties or commission pieces. By morning, I had 9 confirmations for what I was calling a traditional craftsmanship showcase, scheduled for the following Thursday afternoon, strategically timed when I knew James would be meeting with the Regional Contractors Association. Next, I approached Tyler Martinez. The young craftsman had shown both skill and integrity by bringing the secret transition email to my attention. Tyler, I'd like you to prepare a demonstration of hand-cut dovetails for our client showcase. I told him at his workbench, where he was practicing precisely that technique on scrap walnut. Your joinery has gotten exceptionally clean. He looked up, pride and uncertainty mingling in his expression. Really? I'd be honored. But is Mr. Porter okay with this event? He's been pushing us to showcase the CNC capabilities instead. This showcase is my initiative, I said simply. I believe our clients deserve to understand exactly what they're paying for when they commission traditional craftsmanship. Tyler nodded slowly, comprehension dawning in his eyes. I'll prepare the best demonstration I can, Mrs. Caldwell. Over the next week, I systematically built my position. Each morning, I arrived an hour earlier than usual, before James or Rebecca, to document inventory, project statuses, and client communications. I reviewed and photographed invoices, contracts, and project specifications, particularly noting changes made without client approval. My most critical alliance came unexpectedly. At the local lumberyard, I ran into Peter Schaefer, a retired business attorney who had commissioned a library from us years ago. When he asked about recent changes he'd observed in our company's approach, I hesitated, then made a decision. Peter, if you have time for coffee, I could use some perspective from someone with your background. 2 hours later, with my documentation notebook open between us at a quiet cafe, Peter's expression had grown increasingly grave. Irene, what you're describing, changing project specifications without founder approval, excluding you from critical client interactions, negotiating with a corporate buyer without disclosure, these raise serious governance questions, especially given your majority ownership. I've built this company from nothing, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion underneath. I welcomed James into both family and business, gave him opportunity and authority, and now he's systematically undermining everything we stand for. Peter tapped my meticulous documentation. Your record-keeping instincts have served you well. This creates a clear pattern that would be concerning to any business arbitrator. I don't want legal battles, Peter. I want my company's integrity intact, and my daughter to understand what's at stake. He nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the strongest position comes from perfect preparation rather than premature confrontation. Continue documenting everything while you build your support network. When Thursday arrived, the workshop had been transformed. Each station showcased a different traditional technique. Martin demonstrating hand-planing figured maple to a glass-smooth finish. Tyler showing the precision of hand-cut dovetail joints. Our finishing expert explaining the difference between modern spray finishes and traditional hand-rubbed oil processes. At my own station, I had prepared progressive samples, showing proper mortise and tenon joinery with the exact techniques needed for the Hargrove dining room restoration. The workshop filled with clients precisely at 2:00 p.m. Eleanor Aldridge arrived with her interior designer. The Sandersons came, clearly curious after the confusing communications they'd received. And Frances Hargrove brought not only her husband, but 2 members of the Historical Preservation Commission. Welcome to our traditional craftsmanship showcase, I began, standing tall among the wood shavings and machinery. At Caldwell Custom Cabinetry, we've built our reputation on techniques refined over generations. Today, I want to show you why these methods matter for your projects. For the next hour, our clients moved from station to station, touching the wood, asking questions, and witnessing the difference between mass production and true craftsmanship. I watched their expressions of appreciation and understanding. These were people who valued quality and heritage over mere efficiency. The joints you're seeing aren't just decorative, I explained to the group. These traditional methods allow wood to move seasonally while maintaining structural integrity for decades, even centuries. When you invest in pieces built this way, you're not just furnishing your home, you're creating a legacy. Frances Hargrove nodded emphatically. This is exactly why we specifically sought out Caldwell for our dining room restoration. We needed someone who understands historical authenticity. Absolutely, added Eleanor Aldridge. Though I was confused recently when someone from your office called suggesting we use veneers instead of solid panels to meet our budget. The workshop door opened, and I felt a shift in the room's energy. Rebecca stood in the doorway staring at the gathered clients with obvious surprise. Our eyes met across the wood-scented space. Please join us, Rebecca, I called warmly. I was just explaining to the Aldridges the traditional breadboard end construction for their secretary desk. Looking slightly disoriented, Rebecca moved into the workshop. I could see her taking in the scene. Our most valuable clients engaged in conversations with our craftspeople, examining samples, nodding with appreciation at demonstrations of traditional techniques. "When did you organize this?" she asked quietly when she reached my side. "When I realized our clients needed to understand exactly what they're paying for," I replied, just as quietly, "and what they stand to lose if those methods are abandoned." Eleanor approached us, running her fingers along the sample breadboard end I'd prepared. "Rebecca, your mother was just explaining why this construction method is so important for pieces in historic homes like ours. The way wood expands and contracts seasonally needs to be accommodated properly." Rebecca nodded, her design training surfacing. "Yes, seasonal wood movement is a critical consideration, especially with wider solid panels." "Exactly," I said, including my daughter in the conversation. "Rebecca has an excellent understanding of these principles. She designed several features of your desk specifically to address the environmental conditions in your study. For the first time in months, I saw a flash of my daughter's true self, the designer who understood and valued craftsmanship, not just the echo of James's efficiency mantras." When the clients finally departed, Rebecca remained, helping to clear up but clearly processing what she had witnessed. "Mom," she said finally, when we were alone by my workbench, "the clients were really engaged today, especially the Hargroves. People value understanding what makes their investments special," I replied, carefully wiping my tools. "Most of our clients choose us precisely because we don't take shortcuts." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Does James know about this showcase?" "No," I said simply. Just as I didn't know about the Preservation Commission hearing until I was called that morning. Her eyes flickered away from mine. "He's trying to modernize the business, Mom. Make it more competitive. Is that all he's trying to do?" I asked quietly. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me with sudden alarm. "James is on his way back. He got a call from Eleanor Aldridge about some kind of client event here." I nodded calmly, continuing to clean my workspace with practiced motions. "I expect he'll have questions." Rebecca stared at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in months. "Mom, what are you doing?" I met my daughter's gaze steadily. My craftsman's hands perfectly still. "I'm protecting what I've built. The question is, Rebecca, what are you doing?" James burst through the workshop doors like a storm front, his tailored suit out of place among the sawdust and wood shavings. Rebecca trailed behind him, her expression torn between apprehension and awareness. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "Eleanor Aldridge called me about some sort of craftsmanship showcase you organized without my knowledge." I set down the chisel I'd been sharpening and turned to face him fully. The workshop suddenly felt very quiet, though I knew Martin and Tyler were still at their stations, pretending to work while missing nothing. "I invited our most valued clients to see the traditional methods they're paying for," I replied calmly. "The techniques that built this company's reputation. You went behind my back to undermine the modernization initiatives I've been implementing." His voice carried that corporate precision, controlled but with unmistakable anger underneath. "Interesting perspective," I said, maintaining eye contact. "I could say the same about Preservation Commission hearings scheduled without my knowledge, client specifications changed without consultation, and acquisition discussions with National Home Designs that I was never informed about." James's face flickered with surprise before he recovered. "You've been going through my correspondence." "No need. You left their brochure in the workshop. And you should close your office door when discussing selling my company to corporate buyers." Rebecca moved forward, her face pale. "Mom, it's not what you think. National Home Designs is interested in a strategic partnership that could expand our reach." "Rebecca," I cut her off gently but firmly. I've seen the internal emails about legacy staff transition. I've documented the systematic efforts to exclude me from client communications. I've spoken to our suppliers about the standardized materials inquiries. This isn't a partnership, it's an erasure. James adjusted his tie, his tell when feeling cornered. The market is changing, Irene. Small custom shops can't compete with modern production methods. We're trying to secure this company's future by destroying everything that makes it valuable, I asked. By making it profitable, he snapped, his corporate veneer cracking. Do you have any idea how much money we've left on the table with your outdated commitment to hand processes? The Hargrove dining room alone could be completed 6 weeks faster with modern methods, and would be rejected by the Preservation Commission, I reminded him. As it nearly was when you presented without consulting me. A minor setback. They can be convinced. No, they can't. The new voice came from the workshop entrance, where Frances Hargrove stood with Margaret Chen, the head of the Preservation Commission. Both women looked between us with obvious interest. I apologize for interrupting, Frances said, not sounding sorry at all. I forgot my portfolio after the showcase. But I must say, Mr. Porter, I'm disturbed by what I'm hearing. James shifted into client-facing mode instantly, his smile professional though strained. Mrs. Hargrove, Commissioner Chen, we were just having an internal discussion about production methodologies. It sounded more like a discussion about replacing the very craftsmanship we're paying for, Frances replied coolly. Margaret Chen stepped forward. Mr. Porter, the Commission's approval was explicitly contingent on the traditional methods Miss Caldwell presented. Any deviation would require a completely new application and hearing. Eleanor Aldridge appeared behind Frances, her elegant form commanding attention despite her age. I received a very confusing call from someone named Melissa, suggesting we use veneers instead of the solid panels we specifically requested. When I insisted on speaking with Irene, I was told she was transitioning to an advisory role. The workshop had become a stage for confrontation I hadn't planned but couldn't have orchestrated better. Our most significant clients were making clear exactly what they valued about Caldwell custom cabinetry, and it wasn't James's efficiency models. There seems to be a communication breakdown, James attempted, sweat now visible at his temples. I assure you all projects will meet our quality standards. That's precisely what concerns us, Frances Hargrove said. We've commissioned Caldwell because of Irene's standards, not despite them. Rebecca moved to stand beside me, her designer's portfolio clutched against her chest. We would never compromise the quality our clients expect, she said, her voice finding strength. Mom built this business on craftsmanship, and that's what we all believe in. James shot her a look of surprised betrayal. I stepped forward, keeping my voice measured and professional. I think we should continue this discussion in the conference room. The conference room had been transformed. Along one wall, I'd mounted before and after examples of traditional joinery compared to the modified methods James had been implementing. On the table lay neatly organized documentation, client contracts with original specifications highlighted alongside altered work orders, emails about legacy staff transition, and printouts of communications with National Home Designs. As James entered, his eyes swept over the evidence I'd methodically compiled. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed at a loss for words. The clients seated around the table looked at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open disapproval. Mr. Porter, Frances Hargrove began, I believe we deserve an explanation about these discrepancies between what we commissioned and what your recent communications have proposed. Tyler appeared at the door with 2 drawer boxes, one featuring perfect hand-cut dovetail joints, the other with the doweled construction James had specified. Catherine Sanderson, the retired judge, examined both carefully before looking up. The contract I signed explicitly calls for dovetail construction, like my grandmother's bureau. Why was this changed without consulting me? James cleared his throat. The modified construction offers similar strength with improved production efficiency. I didn't commission similar, Judge Sanderson interrupted. I commissioned exact, and I certainly wasn't consulted about any changes to reduce your production time at the expense of what I'm paying for. Eleanor Aldridge nodded emphatically. Nor was I consulted about substituting veneers for solid panels on my secretary desk. I specifically chose Caldwell because of Irene's commitment to traditional methods. Peter Schaefer interjected smoothly. As both a client and someone with legal background, I find these unauthorized modifications to contracted specifications particularly concerning. James looked from face to face, finding no allies around the table. Even Rebecca had taken a seat beside me, her expression resolute. These changes were meant to improve operations, he attempted, his corporate training evident in the pivot, but clearly we should have communicated more effectively with our valued clients. The communication issue extends beyond clients, I said, opening a folder containing the internal emails about legacy staff transition and the National Home Designs acquisition discussions. It appears decisions about the company's future were being made without consulting its founder and majority owner. Francis Hargrove examined the documents with a frown. Are you planning to sell Caldwell custom cabinetry to a national chain? James shifted uncomfortably. We've been exploring strategic partnerships that could expand distribution while maintaining the Caldwell brand identity, while transitioning to standardized production methods that eliminate the very craftsmanship the brand represents. I added, and systematically removing the founder from operations. The room fell silent as the implications settled. I had not raised my voice once, had not made accusations without evidence. The documentation spoke for itself. Finally, Rebecca broke the silence. I think we need to reassess our direction, she said firmly. Our clients have made it clear what they value about Caldwell custom cabinetry, and it's not efficiency at the expense of craftsmanship. James stared at her, betrayal evident in his expression. You're siding against me? I'm siding with quality, Rebecca replied, with the values this company was built on, with what our clients are actually paying for. I looked at my son-in-law, the man I'd welcomed into both family and business, and felt no triumph, only sadness at what could have been. James, you have valuable skills in marketing and business development, but they need to serve our craftsmanship, not replace it. In that moment, with clients nodding in agreement and the evidence laid bare, the power dynamic shifted definitively, not through raised voices or ultimatums, but through the simple, irrefutable demonstration of what Caldwell custom cabinetry truly stood for and who had built it. The transformation of Caldwell custom cabinetry didn't happen overnight. Like a fine piece of furniture, it required careful planning, proper materials, and patient craftsmanship. In the 3 months following what the workshop staff now jokingly called the Showcase Showdown, we reimagined our company structure while honoring its foundations. James initially retreated into wounded silence, clearly shocked by the unified stand taken by clients and craftspeople alike. For a week, I wondered if he would simply leave, both the company and possibly my daughter. But sometimes, when properly shaped and joined, even the most different materials can create something stronger together. Rebecca was the bridge. One evening, she arrived at my home, carrying a bottle of wine and her old design portfolio, the one filled with sketches from her earliest days with the company. I found this while cleaning out the storage closet, she said, as we sat at my kitchen table. Remember when I insisted we should start doing curved cabinet doors, and you made me practice cutting perfect curves for a month before allowing me to implement the design? I smiled at the memory. You were so frustrated with me, because I thought having the design concept was enough, she said, tracing a finger over her old drawings. I didn't understand that knowing how something should look isn't the same as knowing how to make it properly. 2 days later, she convinced James to meet with us at a neutral location, a local restaurant with private dining rooms. Peter Schaefer joined us, not as legal counsel, but as a mediator of sorts. James arrived looking both defensive and defeated. "I assume this is where you ask for my resignation," he said after awkward greetings. "Actually," I replied, "this is where we discuss a more balanced path forward." For the first time, we truly talked, not arguing or positioning, but listening to each other's perspectives. James spoke about his genuine concerns regarding market competition and his fears that traditional methods alone couldn't sustain the business in a changing economy. I acknowledged the value of appropriate modernization while emphasizing the core quality standards that couldn't be compromised. By dessert, we had outlined a restructuring plan that none of us would have created individually. The new Caldwell custom cabinetry emerged with 3 distinct divisions: heritage craftsmanship for historically authentic commissions and high-end custom work, modern custom for contemporary designs that maintained quality while incorporating appropriate technology, and a new training academy would preserve traditional techniques while preparing the next generation of craftspeople. I returned to my role as principal of the Heritage Division, where my expertise in traditional joinery and historical authenticity was most valuable. Rebecca took leadership of the Modern Custom Division, combining her design talent with selective modernization. And James, once he accepted that quality couldn't be sacrificed for efficiency, found his true calling leading the business operations and marketing across all divisions. The transformation went beyond organizational charts. Physical changes in the workshop reflected our new balanced approach. The traditional hand tool section remained sacred, while the CNC equipment found appropriate applications in the modern division. New stations were created for apprentices to learn both traditional and contemporary techniques. Tyler Martinez thrived in this new environment, becoming our first formal apprenticeship trainer at just 29. "It makes perfect sense," he told me as we set up the training area. "I'm still learning traditional techniques from you and Martin, but I also understand the digital processes that connect with younger craftspeople." Our clients responded with overwhelming support. The Hargrove dining room restoration proceeded with historical accuracy, while the Modern Custom Division utilized appropriate technology for their guest house cabinetry. Eleanor Aldridge's secretary desk became a showcase piece in our portfolio, traditional craftsmanship with subtle modern enhancements that preserved quality while improving functionality. Even James found satisfaction in the new structure, especially as financial results validated our balanced approach. The training academy generated unexpected revenue through weekend workshops for homeowners and aspiring woodworkers. "I was wrong," he admitted 6 months after the confrontation, as we reviewed the quarterly financials together. Not about modernization itself, but about thinking it had to replace traditional craftsmanship rather than complement it. And I needed to recognize that some appropriate technological advances could enhance our work without compromising quality, I acknowledged. We're stronger with both perspectives. The conversation with National Home Designs took a different direction as well. Rather than acquisition, we negotiated a limited distribution agreement for a specific line of furniture designed by Rebecca and produced with a careful balance of traditional joinery and modern efficiency. On the 1-year anniversary of our restructuring, we hosted an open house for clients, suppliers, and community members. The workshop hummed with activity as craftspeople demonstrated techniques across the spectrum, from purely traditional to technology-assisted. Frances Hargrove brought several members of the Historical Society. "This is how tradition survives," she told them, gesturing to where Tyler was teaching 2 young apprentices proper hand-planing technique. Not by freezing it in time, but by ensuring its core values continue while allowing appropriate evolution. Later that evening, after the guests had departed, I walked alone through the workshop, listening to the familiar creaks of the building settling, breathing in the sense of wood and finish that had defined my life for over 3 decades. My hands still calloused, still capable, despite the slight stiffness in the joints. traced the edge of a walnut panel waiting to become part of someone's heritage. These hands had built more than cabinets over the years. They had built a legacy, a business, a family. And now, they had helped build a bridge between tradition and innovation, ensuring that what mattered most would endure while allowing necessary change to strengthen rather than diminish it. James had underestimated me because of my age and traditional methods. In doing so, he had missed the most important lesson of craftsmanship. True expertise isn't rigidity, it's knowing exactly which elements must be preserved and which can evolve. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. Some wisdom can only be earned through decades of solving problems, making mistakes, and finding the perfect balance between holding firm and adapting.